Hello and welcome to the Games Insider Conversations That Matter, a special mini podcast series brought to you by Vault Productions in collaboration with WCMC FM 99.9 HD4. Today, we're honored to spotlight Plum Road Tea Dream, developed by Reveal Game Studio, and welcome its creator, Samuel Baidoo, to the show. Plum Road Tea Dream invites players into a reflective, atmospheric journey shaped by memory, ritual, and quiet emotional discovery. As part of our IGF 2026 nomination spotlight, we're exploring how this game turns something as simple as tea into a powerful storytelling device. Samuel, thank you for joining us, and congratulations on the recognition.
Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here as well.
Yeah. So I want to ask first, congratulations, of course. What went through your mind when you learned Plum Road Tea Dream was being recognized?
Oh, okay. This is gonna be a little bit embarrassing, but I'm actually not a game designer, nor am I very familiar with the game sector. So Pepin, the programmer that I work with, who is has been in the sector for many years, he often sends me open calls and stuff, and then he's like, "Yeah, you should apply for this." And usually I just do without always knowing like exactly what it is because he sends me over a lot of things. And so at a certain moment, I got this email of like IGF, and I have no idea what IGF is, or I didn't know what IGF was. Um, and so I just texted him and I was like, "Hey, we're nominated for this award by IGF." And then he called me and he was like, "Samuel, this is huge news." So yeah, I think I realized quite late what it meant. I'm obviously very happy with this recognition and with being nominated, especially because we've worked really hard these past years. It hasn't been an easy journey, and it's nice that it gets picked up.
Awesome. Okay, so for listeners discovering the game or, the story for the first time, how would you describe Plum Road Tea Dream briefly?
I would say that Plum Road Tea Dream is like a semi-autobiographic story. So you really follow someone's journey as a young game designer starting to develop video games. And they start to call these video games sanctuaries. And actually, these sanctuaries turn out to be kind of safe spaces for certain topics that are very dear to the main character. For example, there is a space on queer grief. There is a space on commemoration of Black lives that we lost due to police violence. So I think that although it is in a way cozy and reflective, it also delves into some societal topics.
Yeah, so it gets pretty deep and it's kind of like an art gallery of a game.
Yeah, I think you could say that. I think that also has to do with my background. As I said, I'm not a game designer. I'm an artist and a theater maker that used the game as an artistic medium. So yeah, I think there's many ways to describe it. I usually describe it as if these different spaces and the different landscapes that you're gonna encounter, and then the voiceover that you hear. Meanwhile, that all of this together makes it feel like you're walking around in someone's head and inner world.
Nice. Okay, so the game centers around tea preparation, reflection, emotional exploration. What inspired you to build this narrative experience around something so intimate and ritualistic?
So yeah, as I said, it's like a semi-autobiographical story. The I think the main reason for me that I wanted to share my story, let's say, as a video game, is because I do still feel like queer and POC stories are underrepresented. That's something I also see within the video game sector, as well as in the theater sector, in the art sector that I'm in. And I think representation is just very important for me. I'm like this small kid that never got to see themselves, like represented in popular culture, in comic books, in video games. And I think I mean, there's many reasons why this project is important to me, but I think that's one of the main reasons.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you about if you designed first the mechanics or the emotional arc, but I guess I can assume already that. So I'll pivot the question. Let's do instead, did the theater play come first before the game, and then the game was inspired from it?
So from the very beginning, I always had this theater piece in mind. But the first step to making the performance was, of course, making the game, because the game uses the performance live on stage. Sorry, the performance uses the game live on stage.
Oh,
And so I would say that, like, conceptually, the theater piece was always there, and I was always imagining it while we were creating the game. But then, practically, productionally, also, if I look into like where we started to look for funding and stuff, obviously the game came first. Yeah.
okay. Well, that's actually really interesting. I didn't expect that. So it was kind of intertwined.
Definitely, definitely. For a very big part of the creation, it was intertwined. And I also think that that's maybe one of the specific things about Plum Road Tea Dream, like you were talking about mechanics. I think you can feel that it's not a game made by someone who like knows video game by heart or something. It's actually a game made by a theater maker. And so I think it uses um, yeah, maybe narration in a little bit of a different way, the build-up of the story. But also, like, I think aesthetically there are also some things that are very peculiar about Plum Road Tea Dream that came out of this collaboration between an art theater maker and a group of game designers.
Wow. Okay. So how much personally did you have a hand in making the direction of the story in the game and mechanics and everything?
Yeah. Um, so like I would call myself the creative director of the project. What we did is we kind of game jammed the game together in short blocks of 2 to 3 weeks, where I would go in residency with the small team of game designers that I had. So we would be physically in the space together, and it would be like a continuous ongoing dialogue where I would make sketches that they would translate into the virtual. Also, I did a lot of molding in clay of sculptures, objects that we 3D scanned, and those scans became landscapes or assets in the game. I made little maquettes out of cardboard to kind of convey my ideas. So even though I was not like in Blender modeling in 3D, I was very closely I was very much present at the creation of all of it, and then all of the texts writing the storyline I did together with co-author Fran Vincent.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm getting a vibe of it's very like experiential of a game. You definitely go in to experience it, not to drive the story yourself. But the player isn't just watching a story unfold, right? They're participating in a ritual. So how do you think interaction changes the way players process emotion compared to film or literature?
Interesting question. That's a very good question. I think there is something about a game that's immersive in a different way than that. Uh, for example, a movie or a book is, mainly because you kind of get to make your own journey throughout the world, which sometimes happens very, like, I mean that very literally. Like, for example, how do you navigate the space? What draws your attention? But also, for example, in one of the chapters that I need to think of now in Plum Road Tea Dream, it's called Tea and Plant Care, this chapter. And you have this conversation with S in their apartment, and it's a multiple choice dialogue. So depending on what options you pick, the story is slightly different each time. So you also like are quite literally impacting the story before you, I think, as a player. Yeah, Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, totally. I want to know, actually, I'm really interested. How does that translate during the theater version of the game?
Yeah. So in Plum Road Tea Dream, the video game, you have this voiceover that guides you through these sanctuaries. And in the performance, we kind of took out this voiceover and replaced it by a real life person that's on stage. And we call this person the spirit guide. And they guide an invited guest through the game. And this guest has never played Plum Road Tea Dream before. So for this person, it's a first time experience. And as they game together in front of the audience, they're having a conversation that is inspired by the topics that surface in the game. So the original voiceover is kind of like very subtly woven into the conversation by the spirit guide so that the audience does get all of the stories from the game, but the stories are like layered with personal stories from this guest that is there that night.
That is so unique and fun.
It's a
Um,
lot of fun.
yeah. Okay, so did play testing reveal anything surprising about how players interpret the story?
Um, that's also an interesting question. I'd have to think about that one. We did a lot of play testing in the sense that at the end of each residency where we would work on a segment of the game, we opened up the space and people could come and play the unfinished sanctuaries, the unfinished game. I remember that play testing helped us a lot to improve our level design because in the end it is kind of it is quite a linear narrative in the sense that you're kind of guided towards where you need like to go, and you can decide to stray off the path, but you'll always have to find your way back to the path. And I mean like the literal path, but also like the metaphorical path, the story of the game. So I think playtesting helped us a lot in that sense. It also helped us to make the game really accessible. We wanted the game to be accessible for people that have almost no experience with video games. So there we found a lot of little tricks of how level design could in a very subtle, almost unnoticeable way, tell the player where they need to go, or sometimes even what was expected of them. I think for me, the playtesting also really helped in the sense that I could tell that people were very engaged emotionally by the game and by the story. And it just gave me and the team a lot of energy to keep working on it because we could saw that it was somehow impacting people, that people felt seen, that people felt represented. One of the mechanics in the game, or one of the things that you can also do in the game, for example, is you can journal. There is a journal for you where you can leave your thoughts, and then sometimes after one of these playtesting sessions, someone would send me a message and be like, wow, this is really what I needed. And I've started journaling again at home. Thank you so much, because I kind of lost track of that and it feels great. Like these small things, but they mean a lot to me.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. I was actually speaking to another indie game developer. Their game focused on childhood trauma. And one of the things that they really wanted to focus on as well was accessibility and making sure anybody from any background or even with personal trauma would be able to play the game. So what they did, I remember, was to put trigger warnings that instead of trigger warnings, it was sort of the opposite. It would be like, this upcoming section, you can relax. You don't have to be tense for this. So I was wondering,
Hmm.
how much like accessibility in that sort of sense did you think about when you were making these sanctuaries? I know each space is a safe space for these topics, but how, dark or deep can it get?
Yeah. So I think we refrained, for example, we refrained from using graphical images to depict violence. For example, if I think of the Sunrise Monument at the sanctuary where we commemorate Black lives lost to police violence, the way we do that is there is this poster that I made in real life that you can also find in the monument with names of victims, of people that we lost, that were murdered by the police. But there is no graphical depictions. You can access the information on these things in your own timing. Like there are little boards that you can press to enlarge and then read them. All of the spaces kind of invite you to slow down. Some of the, like, I think the action that you will come across the most in the game is to sit on a chair. So like I think it creates this space that's like rather reflective and that allows people to go through things at their own pace, to also stop if they want. Like you're not obliged to continue. The game is saved almost continuously, so wherever you stop you can like restart. And in general, I think we try to tell the stories and to share the information in such a way that it does not reproduce the violence, so that it is not shocking, that it is not triggering. But we do also think it is important to share it. And then on the other hand, we try to make a lot of space for the healing part of the journey, the joy and the transformation. Also thinking about representation, thinking about representation of queer people, of brown people, of Black people. I think there is often, there is often hardships and trauma shared. And I think it's important to find spaces where you can share pain, but I also don't want that to be the only representation of people like me, right? So we also try to make the game about the healing parts of the journey, about the transformation that maybe comes after the traumatic event, or about how you find a space for it. I think that's also something that, kind of helps people through the entire thing.
Nice. So we don't just want representation in general. We want positive representation,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah.
We totally get that. Over here at Vault Productions, we actually are women owned and led, and also Indian owned and led. So totally get that. Okay, so
Amazing.
sorry?
I said amazing.
Yeah.
I love that.
We're seeing more indie games now explore introspection and mental landscapes. Do you see Plum Road Tea Dream as part of that movement, or do you think it's more that you wanted to drive conversations forward with it? Maybe both.
No, I could definitely see it as part of that movement. I think it's interesting that this project exists in its multiple formats. I feel like the game at home is really meditative. You play it alone. It gives you a lot of time for also your own introspection and reflections. But then, for example, if you come to the performance, it's a collective journey. Throughout the performance, I make tea. At the end of the piece, people can hang around, the tea is served, people chat with us, with each other, and we kind of just create a space where people can just be, hang out, and stay for a little while. So there I see maybe more this part where the game is a starting point for a conversation. So yeah, I think it does a little bit of both, depending on the format. But yeah, I think it's definitely part of this line of games that's looking into introspection, maybe also philosophizing, critiquing society, also creating new rituals within the virtual. Yeah.
Awesome. So that performance space is sort of a sanctuary of its own.
I that's what I always wanted it to be, but you don't know if you achieve that until you until you share it with an audience. And the very first time that we really opened the performance up to a bigger public, um, one of the first things that people said to me when they came up is like, we understand that your journey of creating these spaces for grief in the virtual, but we also think you created that space here in real life. And I think that was like the biggest compliment they could have given me in that moment. So yeah, I was very happy to hear that.
Awesome. Well, being part of the IGF conversation really places your work alongside of some of the most innovative narrative voices in indie games. And many aspiring developers, including growing creative communities around the world, are also looking to build emotionally driven games. So I'd like to ask, what advice would you give to them?
Oh, this is a great question. Let me think about it. Um, if I think about the process of Plum Road Tea Dream, um, there's maybe a few things I would say. I would say be careful with your personal stories and where they end up. Like as I said, I think it is nice and important to be able to share um, pain and hardships, but you also never know how like where this game will be shared, where it will end up, how people are going to look at it. That's for example why we created the alter ego S. So it's like it's an entity that's still a little bit separate from me. I would say take your time for the process. I think that helped us a lot. Creating Plum Road Tea Dream, that we managed to kind of stave off the pressure of a production, so that we could really take our time for making these spaces atmospherical, aesthetically enticing, that we could spend time with the text, but also to make sure that they're safer spaces or sanctuaries. Um, mm, Other than that, I don't know. Follow your gut. Like, yeah, I think that's like the main thing for me with this project. I've been working as an artist for a while, and I feel like this is the first time that I decided and I really said to myself, like, okay, you're doing this for yourself. Follow your gut feeling, even though that it's not always rationally explainable. And somehow I think this has been the project that I've made that resonates the most with people. So apparently somehow when you make something that's really for you, other people can also recognize themselves in that, which I think it's really cool. And that's something that I've definitely learned throughout this process.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll just close out now. Plum Road
Cool.
Tea Dream reminds us that storytelling doesn't always need urgency to be powerful. Sometimes it's found in quiet rituals, in pauses, and reflection. By transforming a simple act into an emotional journey, Reveal Game Studio expands the language of interactive narrative and shows us why spaces like the Independent Games Festival continue to matter. Thank you for joining us at Conversations That Matter, a special IGF 2026 miniseries by Vault Productions and WCMC FM 99.9 HD4. Until next time, keep playing, keep listening, and keep telling stories that matter. Signing off.